Alright, so the last little function that we get to talk about is y equals cotangent of x. Alright, so we know that y equals tangent of x is just sine over cosine of x on both of those. So cotangent is just going to be the reciprocal of that, which is cosine of x over sine of x. Alright, so this is why now, anywhere that I divide by 0, which is where sine is 0, aka your y-coordinate is 0, you are going to get an asymptote. So cotangents asymptotes are actually at 0 and pi. The good news is, just like tangent, this cotangent graph is still going to have that period of pi. Alright, so using that unit circle, I see, okay, well, my graph is going to end up crossing my x-axis at pi halves now, because that is where cosine is 0. And then my other pretty points that I've got, alright, and then other important points that we have, my positive 1 disappeared. And the reason why I say, that 1 disappeared is because, well, I have an important point at pi over 4, well, that's still going to be 1 over 1 once we simplify that down, because I got the square root of 2 over square root of 2 again. And then at 3 pi fourths, well, now I'm going to have a negative 1. Simplifying that down. So one period of cotangent looks something along the lines of that graph. And with that, we're done with the 6 main functions of trig. Alright, so now dealing with transformations, the fun part of this. The first thing that I recommend doing is rewriting these, especially if I see something out in front of my x. It just makes our lives easier, and it makes it nicer to see what transformations I'm actually going to have. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite this as y is equal to sine of negative 2 times x now minus pi over 2. Alright. And why I do that is because in general we had that form last year of y is equal to a times sine, or whatever function that we have, times b times the quantity of x minus something with pi, which, what letter did we use? C, maybe? Plus d was my vertical shrink or stretch. B was my horizontal shrink or stretch. C ended up being my horizontal shift. And D was my vertical shift. And that's about it. So now here I've got, okay, I know that I'm going to go right pi halves, because remember, subtraction makes you go right on the inside. And then I've got this negative 2, which would say, okay, I'm going to reflect across my y-axis. And that 2 says, okay, I'm going to horizontally shrink by 2. I don't know why I just started to write by twice, but it's alright. Okay, so I just scooted my page down a little bit just so I could actually have some room to graph. Alright, another thing that we learned a little bit last year was that my period also got affected by this number b up here. And how we found my period is we said, okay, my period's normally 2 pi, but shrinking or stretching it is going to change that by that b. So whatever b is, it's going to affect my shrink or stretch and my period. So before I even start worrying about my transformations, I'm actually just going to graph it with a period of pi, because that makes our lives a little bit easier. So 0, da, da, da. And that would be graph if my period had just changed by pi. That's it. Now, let's worry about these other transformations. So now let's flip them over the y-axis. So I still have my point here. This is going to get flipped over. My other point's going to get flipped over. My 3 pi fourths. And then my pi is now here. So not as pretty, but still reflected across. It actually almost looks like another period of pi, right? Funny how that works. And so finally, the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually shift that right pi halves. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. There was a glitch in Matrix. Alright, so shifting it right pi halves, that would just be 2 units on my graph. Sorry, apparently it wasn't completely fixed yet. Now it is. So, right pi halves, which is just going to be 2 units to the right. So this point is going to go 1, 2 units over. Bada bing, bada boom. This one's going to go 2 units over. This one's going to go 2 units over. This one's going to go 2 units over. And this one is going to go 2 units over. So finally, my graph ends up looking something like that. Neat. And that's done.